everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome back to another video. Thank you so much for joining me. Today we have a lot of Sussex news to discuss. We really have to catch up a little bit because, as you know, I'm a bit of a slowpoke with getting videos out. So everybody was in a big tizzy over the birthday message that the palace posted for Prince Harry earlier this month. But the media and some of the commentators are missing one big detail, just kind of really ignoring it. It's not showing up in many of the articles that I have read, and it seems like it's just to stir the pot and make it all seem more sensational or juicy than it really is. In this case, the headlines have really stirred up more gossipy sort of vibes, more drama in this situation than is actually going on, which I guess is pretty par for the course with the news organizations, the mainstream media, and how they write articles with their catchy headlines and their clickbait. I mean, everybody in the media industry uses clickbaity sort of titles and thumbnails and things like that. Everybody. So it's not anything new or different, but in this case, it seems kind of irresponsible to consistently be ignoring this one big detail that really kind of tamps down the juiciness of this story quite a little bit. But before we get into what exactly that is, please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. It's completely free and helps make sure you do not miss any upcoming videos. Also, if you would like to, please do leave a comment. If you don't know what to comment, just leave a yellow heart. So here's a little background to the situation in case you are new to following this saga, or just to update everybody and all be on the same page. Ever since Megxit happened in 2020, birthday messages on the official accounts of the real working royals, King Charles, Queen Camilla's joint accounts, like social accounts, as well as the Prince and Princess of Wales, have not been putting out birthday messages for the Sussexes since Megxit happened, for Harry or for Meghan. That is simply because they are no longer working royals. And this was something that the Queen sort of decided as like protocol when Megxit happened. She decided that they would only be putting out public birthday wishes on social accounts to working royals and their children. So that's why, for example, the Wales family will still put out birthday messages for their children, but they're not necessarily wishing out birthday messages for all the royals, all the extended family, because the Queen, in an effort probably to just remove some of the drama from the Megxit situation and be able to distance themselves from Harry and Meghan a little bit, decided that a whole group of things would be exclusive to working royals, and that include making appearances on the balcony for certain events like Remembrance Day or Trooping the Colour, for example, or the Jubilees, the Platinum Jubilee and whatnot. It was going to be only working royals. Birthday messages was another one of those things. She did put in there one exception, and that was for birthdays ending in a 0. So milestone birthdays like your 40th or your 50th. But even without that, they quit their duties as working royals. So just like quitting any other job or organization, it would actually be really weird to continue wishing a happy birthday publicly on the official social media accounts for people who are no longer working. Like, that wouldn't make sense in any other job or industry anywhere. And so, this being Prince Harry's first milestone birthday since Megxit, he turned 40 this year, it makes sense that this happened. It would be cause to acknowledge. Also, he is the king's son, so that gives a little bit more importance or significance to that milestone birthday as well, and makes the reasoning behind it much more valid. At the same time, it makes it much less juicy. This is not something that is connected to a softening on Harry or the royals wanting to build bridges or reach out or open peace talks with the Sussexes. It has nothing to do with that, and everything to do with it being a milestone of the king's son. And that also explains why Meghan Markle didn't have a 40th birthday wish from the royals, as far as I know. I don't believe she was wished a happy birthday on her 40th, the year that she did the 40 by 40. That was 2021, the failed 40 by 40 thing, which we're going to get to in just a second. But I did a little research and I couldn't find an official account wishing her a happy 40th birthday that year. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But I believe the reason why was because she is just married in. She's not a direct grandson or child of the monarch. But it is worth a quick pit stop to discuss the 40 by 40 failed launch. This was an initiative that Meghan Markle tried to put out around the time of her 40th birthday. She hired Melissa McCarthy to do a really cringy SNL style skit where she dressed up like super over the top hat, and they tried to do this like weird having tea thing, and Harry was juggling outside one of the windows. Like, it was just really bizarre. I'm pretty sure Meghan Markle wrote the whole thing because it just had that sort of tone of a lack of good sense of humor and wit. That's just kind of this like tacky, not funny stuff, sort of, is what it came across like. And that's probably part of why it didn't really take off as an initiative. But also, you know, this is part of the problem with Meghan and Harry. She thinks she's a lot more popular and has a lot more impact than she does, especially at that time in 2021. A lot of people, especially Hollywood type people, really have no idea who she is or who she was, because she wasn't as big of a player in Hollywood really at all. She was just, you know, on a cable TV show for a while. The level of fame is not equivalent to somebody who is like a household name that everybody knows and recognizes. But the other reason why this 40 by 40 thing failed was because it was a direct copy of Barack Obama's 60 by 60. So it wasn't just her unpopularity and lack of star power, it was also the fact that this was copying. And Barack Obama is obviously infinitely more famous than she. When something is copied from someone else, literally lifted or plagiarized, it lacks novelty. And that's what really gets people interested in something and motivated to participate in something. Furthermore, especially in elite crowds, it's quite poor taste to replicate what other high-profile people do, because it's tacky, socially inept. It's seen as riding the coattails of someone else, stealing their ideas, rather than having the talent and skill and ability to stimulate your own ideas and successful initiatives, and then execute them well. It was a signal to everybody that she wasn't going to be able to hold her own. In terms of image, it was actually quite damaging that early on in their independent post-Brexit phase. It sort of doomed them, or at least her. It set a bad tone. But anyway, since this policy was made so clear by the Queen, it was quite peculiar that most of the articles I read did not reference this obvious and important point, that this message was posted because the King's son had a milestone birthday. That's it. It's very simple. As for the picture drama, a lot of people noticed that the picture that the royals used looked to be one that Meghan was originally in, but the photographer had cropped Meghan out of some of the pictures that he had taken that day, and so the one that the royals used did, the original from the photographer, not have Meghan in it. Some of the pictures issued from the photographer did have Meghan in it, and they simply chose one that was just Harry. It is kind of funny that this became a news bit, and there's a lot of rumors going around, or assumptions perhaps, that Meghan Markle was behind the articles or the news, the scoop that she had been cropped out. But it's also a picture that I think a lot of people remember because it was really early on in Harry and Meghan's joint ventures together. It was a widely used group of photos, but the palace were not the croppers in this situation. And I do think Meghan was probably irritated that she wasn't in the picture. Apart from control, a lot of people theorize that her clinginess with Harry is so that she's not left out of any pictures. But regardless, it was Harry's birthday, not hers, not their anniversary or anything like that, so it does only make sense to use a picture of just him. So it's not a sign of softening, it's not indicative of a rift healing or anything like that. And the Wales family official account sharing it was simply unity, etiquette, and support for the king. Also, could you imagine if they hadn't reposted it? It would cause such a stir. Headline-grabbing moment. It would be reminiscent of what Harry and Meghan tried to do, steal the limelight. Instead, they reposted it so that there wouldn't be any headlines dedicated to drama surrounding the Wales family or involving the Wales family at all. They did the bare minimum in order to avoid that and still keep things civil. And Harry could learn a thing or two from doing something like that. Perhaps in Harry's 5th decade, he will finally gain some wisdom, some much needed wisdom. Perhaps he will come to realize the damage that he has done and the mess that he has made and try to course correct in some way. Time will tell. So in a recent video, we were discussing the article from The Hollywood Reporter that came out about Meghan Markle being basically a toxic boss, a horrible boss. Ironic, isn't it? And in the comments, there were a lot of people taking issue with the fact that at least one of the staffers that they interviewed claimed that Harry was very, very charming and basically was not the problem in the situation. At least that's the impression that people got. You guys had a really rich discussion in the comment section and had a lot of questions about that particular situation. Looking at both Harry and Meghan, Harry definitely shows a lot less signs of somebody who would be very controlling with staff in particular, especially when you think about how he grew up having a lot of staff just doing their own thing around him all the time, just already doing their work days and functioning normally. Like, he didn't have to manage anybody growing up. They all just did their work, you know? Harry wasn't in charge of telling people what to do ever. So that also signals that Harry probably is a lot less controlling with staff. He probably hardly knows what half the staff should be doing at any given moment anyway. He also strikes me as the type to be quite friendly with staff, perhaps even have a more casual vibe with staff members. But then that only lasts as long as things are going right and people are agreeing with him. Once something goes wrong, he does strike me as the type to lash out in a disproportionate way, the way we have seen him do with the media time and time again. He seems like the type to be really quick to blame and very offended at any disagreements. And so in the context of working for the couple, you can imagine Meghan Markle being a lot more into micromanaging and being a lot more controlling, while Harry would, to an employee, come off a lot more like the good cop in the situation much of the time. But that's not to say he isn't a massive part of the problem for staff. In fact, people who exhibit more narcissistic traits oftentimes can be very charming and friendly on the surface. They can be very intoxicating even around people who they only know casually, like the teacher, their kid's teacher at school, a waitress, a staff member they only see some of the time. This only lasts up until the point that you disagree or make a mistake or tell them advice or feedback that they may not want to hear. For example, Mr. Kelley, who recently departed, Harry's chief of staff, he likely experienced a dramatic 180 that is sort of a hallmark of people who are high in narcissism. The rumor is that Mr. Kelley disagreed so strongly with the process of press censorship at the Columbia trip that it led to his departure from the position, which likely led to this type of conflict with Harry, who was unwilling to hear advice against it and even offended that Kelley didn't support the idea, perhaps because the idea probably came from Meghan Markle herself, or an idea that Harry and Meghan cooked up themselves. By all accounts, they are the types of people who are offended when someone doesn't just wholeheartedly agree and support them 100%. And this is evidenced by their countless lawsuits and statements trying to vilify anybody who hasn't been completely praiseworthy 100% of the time. Good people get criticized. Being criticized doesn't automatically mean you're terrible and bad and should be wounded for it. The best of people still have things that can be improved. That is part of life. Always improving, learning, trying new things, making mistakes. It's just part of life. And if you're in the public eye, particularly trying to do things the way Harry and Meghan are, it's a very slippery slope. It's sort of dicey dynamic. It's a tricky balance, one that the monarchy has really perfected over decades, and a big part of that is not revealing a bunch of personal information, and Harry and Meghan have already stepped in that one. But it also brings to mind part of the problem with the isolation that Meghan has created with Harry. He relies almost exclusively on Meghan for opinions, bouncing ideas off of. Harry relies almost exclusively on Meghan for opinions, bouncing ideas off of, formulating his ideas and opinions with, and getting information. He believes her side of the story, so much so, it's to a fault. Taking him out of the royal bubble, so to speak, and away from all his family members who are quite close and clearly the most capable of understanding the complexities of being related to the king and heir. She also encouraged him to, or allowed, or supported him in neglecting his friendships or cutting them off entirely. He quite simply no longer speaks to a massive percentage of his friends and support network from the UK that he had known for years and years. And now at this point, she has positioned herself as sort of his one and only source. So, for example, if Meghan Markle has a run-in with an employee when Harry isn't around, he has been in a position to believe her version of events, so much so that any employee she simply doesn't like, he is all too ready to just take her word for it. Or if an employee has a negative experience with her, where are they to go? Ask Harry for help to resolve it? He may be receptive at first, but then he will default to believing whatever twisted version of events the Meg offers. This is exactly what happened with staff in the UK, and part of Harry's sort of bewildered vibe that he has. But back to the main point here, it can almost be more telling when someone thinks that one boss, in this case Harry, is very, very charming with no airs at all. That in and of itself is a red flag. A boss shouldn't necessarily be so charming or friendly that you feel super chummy with them necessarily. It gives the impression that he may lack boundaries and professionalism. He resists a professional atmosphere at the least, which then invites a sort of manipulation of the employees in a way. It can be a sort of mindfuck, to be honest, because behind the scenes, in a sort of cowardly way, he then can complain or criticize these employees who in person he is being very friendly with. And it allows for this sort of two-sided, either they're totally nice or totally angry and rageful and terrifying to be around. And that's not really a good thing. Meanwhile, Meghan seems to be pretty consistently obsessively controlling about every single thing and quite difficult to work with, which is evidenced by countless experiences that people had trying to work with her in the UK, the attempt at a shared household with Harry and Meghan and the Wales family, all of it. She is very difficult to work with, clearly, does not take much guidance, and rejected offers of help and guidance and education upon joining the royal family. And that in and of itself is evidence of being quite difficult as well, because it is showing you that you are unwilling to learn or accept information or training or anything like that. And now it is time where we usually do a question of the day, but instead I wanted to feature this really great comment from Fact Check. You should have listened to Prince Philip. No one is interested in you in the long run. Don't court popularity, it doesn't last. Remember, the attention comes because of the position you are privileged to hold, not because of who you are. If you think it's all about you, you'll never be happy. Wise words. It's reminiscent of the seek respect, not attention, because it lasts longer quote. Leave what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!